The rain fell softly over the small border town of Ashwell, tapping against tin roofs and empty streets. Inside a narrow apartment above a bakery, Elena Voss sat by the window, watching the water run down the glass. Her son, Kalen, was asleep on the small bed behind her, his chest rising and falling in slow, peaceful breaths. She looked at him the way she looked at him every night, as if trying to memorize his face before something came to take him away. 5 years had passed since she fled the Blackthorn Kingdom. 5 years since the night the palace burned with betrayal. Since the Alpha King, Damien Blackthorn, was struck down by men who had once sworn loyalty to him. Elena had been carrying his child then, though no one but Damien had known. When the coup came, she did not wait to see if the rumors of his death were true. She ran, because she understood one truth better than anyone in that palace. Bloodlines are only safe until someone remembers they exist. Ashwell was a plain town, far from wolf courts and pack politics. Elena worked as a seamstress by day, cleaned offices in the evening, and sold bread at dawn before the bakery opened. She never complained. She never let herself think about the crown she had walked away from. All that mattered was Kalen, and keeping him invisible. She had never told him what he was. To Kalen, life was simple. He knew his mother worked hard. He knew they moved twice before he turned 4, though he did not know why. He knew he sometimes felt strange, like his skin was too tight, especially on full moon nights when Elena would lock their windows and hold him close until sunrise. He did not know that his body was fighting to become something ancient and powerful. His mother made sure of that. She wrapped his instincts in patience and softness, teaching him to bow his head instead of bare his teeth, to listen instead of dominate. She was raising a wolf prince to survive in a world that had already tried once to erase him. But something in Kalen could not stay hidden forever. It began the week after his 5th birthday. Kalen started noticing things no other child noticed. He could hear his mother's heartbeat from across the room. He could smell rain before the clouds arrived. Dogs on the street, who once barked and pulled at their leashes when strangers passed, would go completely silent and lower their heads whenever Kalen walked by. Elena saw it happening and felt her stomach twist with fear. His wolf was waking up. She tried to slow it down. She kept him away from crowds, avoided strangers who lingered too long, and stopped taking him to the market on Fridays, when the town was busiest. She told herself she had time. She told herself no one from Blackthorn had any reason to look for a woman and a boy in a town this small. She was wrong. It happened on a gray afternoon, when a group of travelers came through Ashwell. They wore plain clothes, nothing that marked them as wolves, but Elena noticed them the moment they stepped into the bakery. She had spent years training herself to notice things others missed, and something about the way they moved, quiet and controlled, sent a warning through her chest. One of them, a tall man with calm eyes, glanced toward the back of the shop where Kalen sat coloring at a small table. He did not smile. He only watched. Elena stepped between them without thinking. "Can I help you?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. "Just passing through," the man said. His eyes lingered a moment longer on Kalen before he turned and walked out with his companions. That night, Elena did not sleep. She sat awake with Kalen curled against her, listening to every sound outside their window. She told herself it was nothing. She told herself the man was simply a traveler. But word does not stay quiet in the wolf world, not once it starts to spread. And somewhere far from Ashwell, in a stone hall lit by candlelight, the surviving members of the Blackthorn Council received a message that made the room go cold. The king's son is alive. For years, they had believed the child, if he existed at all, had died with his mother the night they fled. They had built their power on that belief, splitting Damien's old territory among themselves, silencing anyone who dared to ask questions. An heir alive and hidden was a threat none of them could afford. If the boy grew and one day claimed the throne, everything they had taken would be lost, and worse, they would answer for what they had done to his father. They needed to be sure, and if the rumor was true, they needed the boy gone before he ever understood what he was. Elena felt the shift in the air before she understood the reason. The following week, she noticed unfamiliar faces near the school, men standing too still, watching too closely. She pulled Kalen out of class early and did not send him back. She began packing a bag, the same worn leather bag she had carried out of Blackthorn 5 years earlier, filled with a few clothes, some money she had saved, and a small wooden pendant that had belonged to Damien. It was the only thing she had left of him, and she had never once shown it to their son. "Mama, why are we leaving again?" Kaelin asked, watching her fold his shirts with quick, careful hands. "We're not leaving forever," she said gently, though her voice shook. "We're just going somewhere safer." But safety, it turned out, was not something she could outrun. They made it only as far as the town square before the soldiers arrived. 6 of them, dressed now in the unmistakable dark uniforms of the Blackthorn Guard, stepped out from the shadows of the buildings surrounding the square. Elena froze, her hand tightening around Kaelin's. The townspeople scattered, sensing danger the way people do even without knowing its source. The man who had visited the bakery stepped forward, his calm eyes now sharp and cold. "Elena Voss," he said, "you have something that belongs to the crown." "He belongs to no one," Elena said, pulling Kaelin behind her. Her voice did not waver, though her heart pounded so hard she thought it might break through her chest. "He is a child." "He is the last obstacle standing between the council and peace," the man replied. "Give him to us, and you may live." Elena did not move. She had run for 5 years, sacrificed everything she had, buried every piece of the woman she used to be, all so that her son could have a chance at a normal life. She was not going to hand him over now. She spread her arms wide, shielding Kaelin completely, and looked directly into the eyes of the man who had come to take him. "You will have to go through me," she said. The soldiers exchanged a look and began to close in. Kaelin, hidden behind his mother's trembling arms, felt something rise inside him that he had never felt before. It was not fear, though fear was there too. It was something deeper, older, a feeling that did not belong to a 5-year-old boy, but to every king who had come before him. His small hands curled into fists. His breath grew tight in his chest. He did not understand what was happening to him, only that his mother was afraid, and that the strange heat inside him wanted to protect her, the way she had always protected him. He stepped out from behind her. "Kaelin, no," Elena whispered, reaching for him, but it was too late. The boy opened his mouth, and instead of a cry or a scream, something else came out, a sound low and resonant, rolling through the square like distant thunder. It was not loud in the way a shout is loud. It did not need to be. It carried a weight that pressed against every chest in that square, a frequency buried deep in wolf blood that recognized true authority the moment it heard it. One by one, the soldiers dropped to their knees. It was not something they chose to do. Their legs simply gave way beneath them, as though an invisible hand had pressed down on their shoulders. The man who had spoken to Elena moments before fell hardest of all, his eyes wide with shock, his hands trembling against the cobblestones. He had commanded soldiers for over a decade. He had never once knelt to anyone in his life, not even to the corrupt council that now ruled in Damien's place. Yet here he was, on his knees before a child, unable to explain why his own body refused to obey him. Across the square, doors and windows creaked open as townspeople peered out, drawn by the strange stillness that had fallen over Ashwell. None of them understood what they were witnessing, only that something important, something enormous, had just happened in their quiet little town. Elena stood frozen, staring at her son. Tears filled her eyes, not from fear this time, but from a mixture of relief and heartbreak. She had spent 5 years hiding this exact truth from him, praying he would never have to use it, and now here it was, spilling out of him in the middle of a public square, undeniable and unstoppable. Kaelin turned to look at her, his small face confused and a little frightened by what he had just done. "Mama," he said quietly, "why did they fall down?" Elena knelt in front of him and pulled him into her arms, holding him so tightly he could barely breathe. "Because you are exactly who you were always meant to be," she whispered against his hair, and it's time they knew it. The soldiers, still kneeling, did not attack. They could not. Whatever force had passed through Kaelin's voice, it did not fade quickly. Some of them wept without understanding why, others simply stared at the boy, their instincts screaming a single truth their minds struggled to accept. This child was their king. Word of what happened in Ashwell spread faster than any army could travel. Within days, every noble house connected to the wolf world had heard some version of the story, and though details changed with each retelling, one fact remained the same in every version. The Blackthorn heir was alive, and his very presence had brought grown alphas to their knees without a single blow being thrown. The council that had ruled in Damien's absence fell into panic. Some tried to deny the rumors. Others tried to flee before the truth caught up with them, but it was too late. The families and lesser packs who had quietly resented the council's rule for years saw their chance and seized it, withdrawing their support one by one, until the men who had orchestrated Damien's downfall were left with nothing but empty titles and crumbling loyalty. Elena and Kaelin did not return to Blackthorn immediately. She was cautious even now, unwilling to trust so quickly after everything she had endured. But eventually, envoys came, not soldiers this time, but representatives sent with formal apologies and promises of protection. They spoke to Elena with a respect she had never received in her life, addressing her not as a fugitive or an outsider, but as the mother of their rightful king. It took time for her to believe it was real. On the day they finally returned to Blackthorn territory, Elena stood at the edge of the old palace grounds, holding Kaelin's hand as she had every day for the past 5 years. The building was different now, repaired and cared for by people loyal to Damien's memory, waiting patiently for the day his bloodline would return. As they walked through the gates, wolves who had once served under Damien lowered their heads in quiet respect, not out of forced fear, but out of genuine reverence for the boy who had done what none of them could: silence an entire kingdom's doubt in a single breath. Kaelin looked up at his mother as they walked. "Mama," he said softly, "is this our home now?" Elena smiled. Though her eyes were wet with tears, she no longer tried to hide. "Yes," she said, "this is where you belong." She thought of Damien then, of the life they had planned before everything fell apart, of the nights she had spent alone raising their son in secret, terrified every single day that this moment would never come. She thought of every sacrifice, every lie she had told to keep him safe, every tear she had cried in silence, so Kaelin would never see her fear. It had all led here, to this quiet walk through the palace gates, to a boy who had not needed an army or a crown to prove who he was. All he had needed was his mother's love, and one true roar. The kingdom did not simply welcome its heir back that day. It learned, in the space of a single breath, exactly whose blood still ran strongest through its history, and exactly how far a mother's love could carry a child through darkness until he was ready to stand in the light. And as the sun set behind the palace walls, casting long golden shadows across the courtyard, Elena finally allowed herself to feel something she had not felt in 5 long years. She felt safe,